and some call it drought. Somehow, drought is hardly ever associated with cold, but you can have dry cold. But no matter how you split the hair, no matter how much of a microscope you use to see the tree in the forest, we all know what's going on. Everywhere you look, everything you touch reveals a symptom of what's happening today. Drought, evaporation, heat reveals a new Stonehenge. And to me, it started back in 2011. We lost 70 to 80% of our corn crop. Turkeys and chickens died. It was amazing what happened in 2011. And we started seeing mass animal die-offs. Shocking. And what was even more shocking is that those numbers just kept increasing until they couldn't increase anymore. Everywhere you look, unless you close your eyes, everything you hear, unless you close your ears, reveals what is happening. We could split hairs about what's causing it, and whether it's anthropogenic, man-made, or whether it's solar system, or whether it's some other cycle that nobody can explain. When you look at the total solar irradiance maps and graphs as far up as 2010, and you go back, you see a long, long history and not a redacted snippet, cherry-picked portion of the graph. When you look at the overall trend for the last several decades, you see an exponential or an accelerated curve in many of these metrics. I use land temperature for temperature-based, but you can just look around and understand that something's going on. And the problem is nobody in 2011 was complaining of freezing. And they want to call it a drought. That's fine. Back in 2011, we were calling it heat. And air temperatures are subjective, because on a given day when it's overcast, whether you're in the shade or the sun, it amazes me how much you can see a variance in air temperature. What to me means more than anything is surface temperatures, because very few things can heat the ground. And when the ground and the water surface tells you that the radiation graphs tell you the same thing, when you look at a surface temperature plotting up until 2010, going back, it almost mirrors your irradiance. Well, what's causing increased irradiance? We're not talking about ozone, we're talking about measurements of the sun. But when you plot them on the same graph, you can see that they're tied together, and gives rise to the Maunder minimum, because low sunspots supposed to mean low solar irradiance. In fact, they used to calculate irradiance off the number of sunspots. So that metric has gone out the window. We cannot and do not see a correlation to sunspots and energy anymore, not since 2003. or past 2003. It's been a rather sudden increase in the irradiance, and it's been a sudden increase in surface temperatures. And when you want to understand what's causing the irradiance, the radiation coming from the sky, usually thought of as coming from the sun, you have to look at very few causes that can increase the radiation from the sun. But graphs that cut you off, they frustrate me, because it can overall affect the entire slope of your graph. And so you need as much updated graph as possible, and forget climate models. Anybody talking about a climate model, my model is better than your model, is overlooking the painfully obvious. Arguing over models is stupid when you have blatant evidence of what's happening before you. There's nothing more controlling of our climate than the sun. Without the sun, there would be no climate. There would be no earth. There would be no arguments. And when you look at sea surface levels, but in many places, in almost all places, and these are real minor, by the way, these sea level amounts at the top of the graph have gone up. So what gives when you look at the oceanic surface temperatures? What can heat the surface of your ocean? And you want to say carbon dioxide, that's fine, but why are you leaving out the instruments that prove the solar radiance is mirroring land temperatures? And what's the best absorption and absorber of radiation? Water and the ground. So the heat content of the ocean in the Barents Sea has been very apparent, and we've had huge methane plume detonations in the Barents Sea. That was the graph we just showed you. But other temperature contents of basic sea bodies of water, we can see again an increase, almost never a decrease in the oceanic temperatures. And these are measuring down to 700 meters. Imagine what that graph would look like if you just measured the first 25 meters of ocean. But in some areas, the heat content has gone down, to be fair. And buoys tell us that our oceans are hotter every year. And it's true in the Mediterranean, it's true in the Indian Ocean, and most of these decreases we see are in the northern hemisphere. But when we look at the temperature anomalies, they're blatant, everybody's seen them, but really the equator is just getting hotter than you can imagine. And 1/3 of the earth looks like it is cooking, and that's the middle third. And it doesn't matter where you look, you'll see evidence of this. And just because there's a cold record here or a cold record there means nothing in a massive, complex, chaotic atmosphere. And as long as you have ice, you will have mixing of cold and warm. But more and more, the warm has been overtaking the cold and is killing more people than the cold spells will ever kill. But when you plot irradiance and surface temperatures, you basically have a hard time discerning which is which. because they mirror each other so closely. So if irradiance and surface temperatures are so closely related, then why in the world would anybody even think that we're getting colder and there's not a problem? When you look for the cause and you just look at cosmic rays, you see the cosmic rays are going up, up, up. Neutrons carry a far greater radiation value than the other particles, and then alpha particles, which are ionized helium, and there's a few around Earth. Most of those are found in the focusing cone of the sun. But when that's up 23% in 5 years, you can imagine what the 10-year total will be. So when you see cosmic rays going up, then you have to look at gamma rays and neutrons. And we have seen an increase in overall, and I'm sorry I don't have a long-term map to show you, but you don't really need a long-term map when you have cosmic ray monitoring in the stratosphere, because those are created by primary cosmic rays. And if those go up, primary cosmic rays, then so will your secondary cosmic rays, which are highly energetic radioactive particles. You're looking at positrons and electrons, which if they attract one another, can annihilate and produce gamma radiation. Tremendous energy when a positron is split out of an atom nucleus and comes in contact with electrons. So if you have this collision in our magnetosphere, you're going to have annihilation. But then you create neutrons, and neutrons are worse than the positron electron annihilation, because they give off more of a steady decay. Instead of a flash, like a flash bulb, it's a searing decay. And if this is the case, if cosmic rays have gone through the ceiling and solar irradiance has gone through the ceiling, you would be a fool not to think that they are not related. And so you have to look and see how can cosmic rays cause increased irradiance? And the answers we have been given to you. There's three processes by which neutral particles, which are low energy particles, can create a tremendous amount of energy. One is the loss of electrons, annihilation, that produces alpha particles, decay, alpha decay. So there's a source of radiation, the loss of electrons and alpha decay, just coming from a neutral helium. When that particle collides, you have a pinpoint emission where you have highly radioactive nucleus particles annihilating or splitting other atoms, creating even more gamma radiation. And the third form of gamma radiation is the scattering of free electrons, and that produces gamma radiation and irradiance as well. And when people talk about the cosmic ray increase, when you try to figure out what's going on by researching the stuff coming out of astronomy, well, you're going to see references to protons, and more protons. There's one problem, though, when you're trying to figure out a cosmic ray puzzle using protons, and that is there are no protons. The protons are gone. They've been gone. They've been gone since 2016, 2017. We have not seen a proton, not even in coronal hole streams. So don't tell me it's because we don't have CMEs, because coronal hole streams have protons. And it's frustrating now because when you try to figure out what's going on, you see references to protons and more protons. Problem is, no protons. So then, what's creating the gamma radiation? When you look at the proton counts, and you're like, well, where are all these neutrons coming from? Where are all these positrons coming from? Where are all these electrons coming from? Where's all these record high number of cosmic rays coming from if there's no freaking protons? And the next most abundant element in the universe is helium. So when you try to understand the correlation between cosmic rays and temperature, or irradiance, then you have to forget the proton, because there are none. There's none. They're gone. And we know why they're gone. We've dug down every rabbit hole and figured all this out. And so the helium runs as helium-3, helium-4. Helium-3 is deficient of a proton, and therefore, when helium-3 runs into protons, it absorbs them. And that reaction creates radiation. So, try to understand that the cosmic rays are creating the irradiance. The irradiance is creating the heat. The heat is heating the land and the surface to greater extremes than the air, which is predictable. And understand then that this process is not going to turn around anytime soon.